What's the biggest adult temper tantrum you've ever witnessed? EMS, the woman who caused an accident, was screaming that the driver of the other car was faking it for the insurance payout when we were loading him onto the stretcher. When the cop told her they were in a bad way, she threw herself on the ground and said, "Well, if he can do it, then I have neck pain too." Meanwhile, we're preemptively shaving this guy's chest for the AED pads because he's decompensating so quickly. Her purse was laying in the road, so we ran it over when we did a U-turn to leave for the hospital. Also, the guy ended up being okay, but was probably in for a long recovery. Don't text and drive. It's always other people who have to pay the price for it. At Chick-fil-A one day, I saw this obese dude who must have been at least 40 slamming a tray on the counter repeatedly and yelling at the staff behind the counter because they didn't have his favorite sauce. He started stomping from end to end, screaming that he knew they had more in the back and he wasn't fricking leaving till he got his sauce. When the manager came out to ask him to leave, this man-child legitimately sat on the floor and crossed his arms, saying he wasn't moving. I got my food and left ASAP. I want to go on record saying that if you have ever thrown a fit or yelled at some entry-level customer service employee, you are, without exception, a bad person. I don't care what happened, you're a bad person, and you should know that the people you call friends know this about you. They talk about you behind your back. I promise. It was back in the late summer of 1994, and I was invited to a Carrot Top show. Back then, Carrot Top was a red-headed prop comic and not the bizarre steroid beast he is today. Anyway, about 20 minutes into the show, he started to freak out. It seemed as though the monitors weren't working or something because he kept complaining about how funny his crap was and how well his prop gigs had gone over in other venues. To be clear, he was being amusing and the crowd was laughing along as one might expect, but he wasn't getting any of that feedback for some reason and he started to spiral into losing it entirely. He yanked one prop after another out of his trunk faster and faster and louder. Eventually, he had a complete breakdown, burst out into full-on tears, started sobbing, dropped everything, covered his face, and ran off stage. The crowd was confused because, let's face it, no one really knew what to expect from the guy. But he never did come back on stage, and after another couple minutes, the lights came on and we all left, 20 minutes into the show. When I worked in retail, the woman that freaked out because I wouldn't let her return a piece of chicken breast originally from the meat department dated several months prior to this interaction that she had frozen and did not have a receipt. I love retail. Working on a local theater project, the lead actress's birthday was in the middle of the final week of rehearsals. We're all packed into the theater for hours on hour per day, but there's still time to celebrate. We pass a card around and the director decides she'll bake a cake. When we take a break, someone brings the lead actress out on stage so we can cut the cake singing happy birthday and give her the card. Everything is going well. Then suddenly, there came a great screeching. The director was displeased. Apparently, no one had asked her to sign the card. To be clear, she'd seen it being passed around, but no one had actively asked her, and she took that as an insult. She slammed the cake to the floor right in front of the poor lead actress, screamed at all of us for being so inconsiderate, and stormed off. Happy birthday. Wow, so the director ruined both this poor lady's birthday and almost the show, I dare say. Like, having something like that happen during the last weeks of rehearsal, I'm willing to bet most of those actors were not having nearly as great a time after that. My ex-girlfriend started screaming and throwing clothes out of her closet because her family's maid had placed them out of order and she couldn't find a shirt. This was in Mexico City and I'm from Canada, so I was a bit shocked. I laughed my butt off and told her she was being ridiculous. On Christmas Eve a couple years ago, I suggested my family play a board game. First, we tried Scrabble. I turned the word praying into sprayings and got something like 50 points. My brother got extremely upset and claimed that wasn't a valid word. I Googled it, and it was indeed a word. He got mad and pulled up the official Scrabble dictionary, and lo and behold, sprayings wasn't in it. I told him to just calm down since it was just a game, and he flipped the board over and got the letters all over the place. He then stormed off, not to be seen again. That same night, we tried to make up by playing Monopoly. My brother considered himself a Monopoly expert, whereas everyone else hadn't ever played it. My sister was super unenthusiastic about the game and refused to ever trade properties with him just to be petty. My brother was progressively getting more and more mad. My mom was completely siding with my sister, which got him so upset he eventually flipped the board over again and got little plastic houses and cards and crap everywhere. He started screaming at my mom and telling her that she had failed parenting my sister because she intervened too much when they were kids. The argument ended with my dad bursting into tears, first and only time I had ever seen him cry, and all of us just sitting in the living room in silence. My brother was 28 at the time. I don't care what age he was, that's some crap behavior. I'm just kind of shocked you chose to play a second board game with him, and chose the most infuriating board game imaginable at that. A former friend's wife. We were going to a Christmas party at a mutual friend's house the next day, but I went over to his place to bake the cake I was bringing and hang out and play games. Her sister was there too. So I get there, his wife is in their living room with her sister. The wife is sitting on the couch folding clothes, the sister's in an armchair holding her baby. He picked up a present of hers, the new model of Keurig she wanted, but hadn't had time to wrap it yet. It's sitting in the living room under a blanket near the Christmas tree. Their daughter, about 2 at the time, pulled the blanket off the Keurig. My buddy's wife, who is a director-level employee for a ward at the hospital, throws the entire basket of folded clothes into the floor, dumps the rest of the clothes in her lap in the floor, and slides off the couch into the floor in tears because he bought the wrong color of Keurig. She's crying, yelling at him about how he obviously doesn't care about her because he didn't get the right color. She should just divorce him because he can't ever get anything right. Over the color of a coffee maker. Maybe you should have got the baby a new pacifier, huh? Wah, my coffee maker's the wrong color. Anytime security tells guys they can't vape in the mall. My roommate junior year literally got on the floor kicking and screaming because her ex wasn't talking to her. Literal, actual temper tantrum. And her ex had very good reasons not to talk to her. My other roommate came out very confused and asked if she could have her fit somewhere else because she had an exam the next day and needed to study. Temper tantrum girl then proceeds to get up and storm out because we didn't give her the attention that she sought. She was one of my closest friends, but that friendship declined rapidly after that. Not me, but my friend. My friend works in a government office. Some woman had to wait online and was not happy about it. In protest, she pulled down her pants and took a crap in the middle of the floor. When I worked in retail at a place that sold phone accessories but not as a primary product, office supplies, this lady came in asking for a case for her iPhone 6, which was just released at the time. Because it was released maybe a week prior, we did not have any in stock, and I told her so. This grown-ass woman stomped her foot, pouted, and cried, "But I want one!" I said, "I'm sorry, maybe we'll get some in stock soon. Let me ask my manager." She pouted, stomped her foot again, and said, "But I need it now!" I just walked away. First world problems, honey. First world problems. My cousin lost a match at his MMA gym, it wasn't an official one, and hurt his shoulder, was not even bruised. And he couldn't open my front door quick enough, so he punched the glass in, and I got glass in my eye for Christmas. I feel like maybe your cousin has anger issues. Just a little bit. I used to work at a large event stadium that housed several of the state's sports teams. I can't remember which team was playing, I think basketball, but it was definitely New Year's Eve, and I had been assigned to the private suites, the hoity-toity rooms that the owners of the teams and various companies used to schmooze clients and order food at 5 times the normal price. We had been explicitly clear that the suites would not be open until midnight. Guests could go down to one of the large event rooms where there was food, booze, games, etc., but the suites were closed by 10 p.m. We sent out emails explaining this. There were flyers left in the room with a reminder and directions to the festivities, and we were made to remind each guest beforehand face-to-face to avoid any confusion. Needless to say, the staff wanted to get out of there early enough to enjoy the holiday themselves, so we all made sure to be on top of this. I did this with all of my suites, and they nodded in agreement, except for one guy. Let's call him Entitled Man Baby, or EMB. When I politely reminded EMB that the suites would be closed at 10 p.m., he instantly looked away at his friends and said, "Yeah, we'll see about that," and walked away without a word to me. I tried to press the matter, but he refused to look at me. Eventually, his friend just nodded and shooed me away. Sure enough, 9:55 comes rolling around and they still have their stuff everywhere. They're opening new drinks and trying to order more. I politely remind him that we would be closing in 5 minutes, and he said, we're not going anywhere. I'm very close friends with, insert the name of the sports announcer here, and we're not leaving for a long while. I said, sir, I'm sorry, there seems to be a misunderstanding. The suites are closing in 5 minutes, but we'll be more than happy to show you to the New Year's event just a few minutes away. EMB, we're not leaving. And again, he just turned away and refused to acknowledge or look at me. That SOB refused to leave for an hour and a freaking half. My boss came to nicely explain to him, my boss's boss came to nicely explain to him, then security came to explain it to him. At which point his friends couldn't contain him any longer. Exactly like the quintessential image of a spoiled child throwing a tantrum, he clenched his fists, stomped his foot, and held his breath until his face was red. Then he let out the highest pitch and loudest freaking sound that I have ever heard come out of a human being. I am not going anywhere! We know, sports announcer! I was promised that I could stay here and I'm not leaving! It was almost worth it just to see the faces of his friends drop in utter disbelief. They had been enjoying the slightly silly ego trip he had been having, but this was over the top. The entire room just stood silent for a solid 30 seconds before my boss's boss said, "Yeah, okay." She turned and walked out. Shortly after, the infamous sports announcer guy walks in himself and starts apologizing to EMB. Announcer, "Oh, it's good to see you. So sorry for the mix-up. I have a nice private room waiting for you. Come with me. So sorry." Mother fricker left at 11:45. I spent midnight on the train, headed back home. I kind of love that this person's friends got to see him act like that at least. Gives me hope that some of them will distance themselves from him, or maybe at least tell him that he's a huge piece of human excrement. Insert story from any client-facing job. Ages ago, I worked at a post office for minimum wage. In the post office, there was a photocopy machine that clients can pay for to make photocopies before sending them in the mail. This was a service provided by a third party, and we had signs saying as such. The provider even had a sign up saying, "Call this number if you have problems with this machine." Cue man coming in to mail something. He wanted photocopies. No problem, point to the machine across from me. He puts money in and starts copying. At some point, he starts cussing under his breath. He walks up to the counter and starts bishing that the machine ate 5 cents. Yes, 5 pennies worth of money. 1/20th of a dollar. Starts yelling and demanding the money back. There's a number on the machine, and I can't just give him money from the business. Throws an absolute hissy fit. He's going on and refuses to call the number. He asks for a supervisor. No problem, I don't make enough to deal with this. I call her over, and she looks at me and goes, "Can we give him the money back?" I say, "No." She looks back at the client. "Sorry, but we can't give you the money back. Call the number." He spends at least 20 minutes with the supervisor. He refuses to leave, so I call security. Security shows up and literally the same thing. "Did you call the number?" And he still refused. They physically escorted him out, and he was shouting at the store manager on the way out. 5 pennies, and refused to dedicate even a minute to call the number on the machine he's complaining about while wasting almost an hour in the store. I was waiting in line at a convenience store, and a woman at the cash wanted to buy cigarettes. The cashier wouldn't get them until she showed ID. The woman started freaking out, refusing to show any ID, and saying she was old enough and verbally attacking the cashier for doing their job. Finally, this woman just storms out saying, "I'm never shopping here again." Before I could stop myself, I ended up shouting back at her, "Good, that leaves more for decent human beings." She turned and her face was bright red with an expression that looked like a combination of embarrassment and rage. The cashier had what I can only describe as a look of immense gratitude. I'm guessing they wanted to say something similar to this woman, but didn't want to lose their jobs and was glad someone else said it. Folks, take this to heart. If you are a customer and another customer is being a major D, call the customer out. Call them the worst things you can think of. The cashiers will be grateful, it'll feel cathartic for you, and the customers can't do crap to you. Well, maybe they can, but it's usually worth it. I work at a major electronic retailer, and a few months ago I answered the phone to a customer that told us his iPad was defective and that he was going to bring it in, and demanded we give him the newest model we had. I asked him when he bought it, and he responded, Black Friday in like 2015. I laughed and told him it wasn't happening. He started screaming at me, telling me about how he was going to own my store and the company, then demanded to speak to my manager. I told my GM the situation, handed him the phone, and he told the guy the same thing I did and hung up on him. The guy apparently tried the same stunt about 2 hours after I left. Not sure what he expected out of it. My mother-in-law, who we no longer talk to, has a meth problem, and I've seen her throw tantrums about everything. She will throw an adult tantrum anytime she doesn't get her way. However, one of the best ones happened before I came into the family. I'm close to her sister, my husband's aunt, and she told me about a family gathering where my mother-in-law claimed to make homemade cornbread. But in reality, she took a couple of bags of Jiffy and added a couple cups of sugar to it. Her sister told her it wasn't her recipe, it was from a bag, and she started screaming in her face and following her everywhere, yelling in her face about cornbread. She's become absolutely unbearable on or off drugs, and no one in her family, including us, currently has anything to do with her. I mean, I'll get loud and vocal about good cornbread, but Jiffy with sugar? Nah. Some people I work with got in a disagreement over management styles. One got so mad off she took a leave of absence for a month to cool down. When she came back, it started again, and now she's gone for 3 more weeks. Edit. Grammar and what I remember, they never really liked each other and argued out in the open loud, cursing at one another regularly. I'm pretty sure even Jesus himself called HR. One time when I was working my crappy fast food job, a coworker no-showed, so my boss had me call him. I left a message. Hi, this is Fluffy at Crappy Pizza. I was just calling because you are in the schedule today at 10 a.m. and manager wanted me to check with you to see if you are just running late. His girlfriend called back. I answered and kept screaming at me for talking to her man. It was the most insane thing ever. There was this girl that was part of our friends group for a while in our early 20s. She was the definition of spoiled. Her parents were amazing. They were immigrants who had started a reasonably successful construction business, and her dad decided after a cancer scare that he needed to spend more time with his family/kids and make the most out of life. They took her on all these amazing vacations, bought her a decent, new but middle-range car, designer handbags and sunglasses, the whole 9 yards. They also put a pretty massive down payment on a house for her, probably covering about 50 out of 37 of it so that her mortgage and other costs were less than her rent. She calls me one day, sobbing. She is upset because her parents, who pay for everything while she spends her money from her full-time job on clothes, makeup, and partying, are making her dip into her savings on a lawyer to close the deal for the property they bought her. She is inconsolable. I have to try to explain to her that for the most part, their first home will be their entire savings, and that her parents have basically given her all these amazing things that other people don't get. We hung up for a bit, and I guess she accidentally butt-dialed me when she was talking to her parents about it, and she was full-on yelling at them for daring to make her pay for a lawyer, telling them she hates them, that she never wants to see them again, and that they're the most horrible people she's ever met. We had already started fading her from our friend group somewhat, but it was a fairly quick downhill slope from there. The sad thing is, even though her dad turned things around later in life, being more focused on family, it's likely his success that affected the way he raised her. She didn't turn out like that because of great parenting, which is just sad. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. A girl hit my car with her car door at a gas station and thought I didn't see. My car was black, hers was candy red. You could see her paint on my car. She opened it hard. I waited for her to come back out and nicely asked if she would rather go through insurance or just give me cash for whatever touch-up paint cost. I was prepared to call Honda, ask, and let her listen. She was fairly young. I was 23. She was probably 18 to 19. I was trying to be nice by offering not to call what was probably her mom's car and her mom's insurance. She blew up, screaming that I was an effing liar trying to steal her money because I was a greedy white mother fricker. She was black, I'm sorry I had to include this detail, but it stands out in my mind. As multiple children walked by, she continued to scream and curse. I asked her if she would calm down and look at the scratch to see that it was clearly her car paint, and I called the police when she got physical. She broke my glasses by grabbing at my face when I got too close. I never touched her and was probably nervous or something if I was actually too close. I don't know. The police reviewed security footage that showed her clearly hitting my car, looking at it, and walking away. I was asked if I wanted to press charges for assault. Her clawing at my face and pushing me multiple times was on video, and with the officers there, she was still verbally abusing me. I said no, and they forced her to surrender insurance information, and I never saw her again. I can actually answer this. Back in my teens, I used to work at a sort of guided tour in my city. The tour took place in a sort of small car designed to look like a train, and people would sit in wagons behind it while I drove around and explained stuff about our city. We also provided a shuttle service at set times from and to a parking place for a theme park nearby. Outside of these times, we would not ride because we weren't paid at all. We drove the whole morning until 12, and then we drove from 4 to 8 p.m. I experienced many tantrums, as one does in tourism, but one of them I can still see as clear as day. There was a family of 6 people who approached us while we were off duty, so to say. The trains were all parked. The father of the family approaches me and says that they would like to go back to their car. I explained that we do not drive at these hours and that we did specify that during the ride over here. He called me a liar. My boss was in the train reading a magazine, and this guy walked toward him all huff and puff. So my boss opens the window and asks if he can help him. Dude asks the same question. Boss gives the same answer. This guy just flipped his crap. He started yelling and screaming like he was 7, jumping on the train and off, punching the windows, all the while turning red, tears running over his face. His wife, in the meantime, chose to walk away with the children looking all embarrassed. An old man who was with them calmly walked toward the man having a tantrum and said, "Get down." Guy keeps screaming at me, at my boss, at the old man, and anyone else who comes near him. This old man walks closer to the guy, suddenly jumps up and grabs his ear and drags him from the train. The guy is screaming, "Sorry, Dad, sorry!" I mean, this was a grown butt man behaving like he was 7. Still stumps to this day that some people are like that. You know, I understand that people get mad sometimes. I even excuse little bursts of anger, like yelling once or something. But if you throw a full-on tantrum, I will think so much less of you as a person. My psycho ex-boss thought he was alone in the office one night, and Excel chose that time to frick with him. It wouldn't calculate a formula correctly. Couldn't be the fact he didn't input it correctly, no. So he absolutely launched into a swearing tirade at maximum volume. I froze in my cubicle, afraid to touch my keyboard, and inadvertently announced to him he in fact wasn't alone. He kept trying to redo the cell, and every time it failed, he would get more and more belligerent. His voice started raising higher and higher while I remained frozen. Eventually, he started fricking crying. He blubbered about this stupid fricking program, and I was now panicking. I couldn't walk out because the door was right next to his office. I couldn't make a noise. I was stuck. He decided to get up and take a walk, and that's when his tirade paused dead in its tracks. My eyes shot to my desk lamp. Frick. It was on. Then I heard footsteps approaching. Frick, frick, frick. I scanned my desk. An idea flashed into my head. My hand shot out, grabbed my headphones, and threw them onto my head in one quick movement. I started bobbing my head when he walked around the corner and said, "Well, that was a bit embarrassing." I ignored him, facing my screen, pretending the music was blaring. He tapped me on the shoulder, and I acted all shocked. I took off my headphones and faced him. He was sweating. He said again, "Well, that was a bit embarrassing. Did you hear my tirade?" I told him I did not. My music just too loud, you see? We talked a bit, whatever. End of the story. I've never heard in my life a hissy fit like that, and I hope I never do again. It went so far past amusing, past cringy, to downright scary. My ex-girlfriend was basically a giant tantrum waiting for an excuse. We broke up. She called me wanting to go to an event, and me, being an idiot, thought, why not? So we are at a vendor, and they don't have any more of this small $5 item she wants to buy. And she was off. So, she would start off with this kind of catch in her voice. What do you mean you don't have random item? Random item was the only reason I came to this stupid event. And then she would do this quiver to her chin that made her go in this high keening wail and start stomping her frickin' feet and hitting displays and scream and other crap. And she went full bore, and the poor person behind the counter had just those huge oh my god eyes. And this huge crowd of people that are at the event are staring at her, and it dawned on me. Hey, I don't have to deal with this crap anymore. We aren't in a romantic relationship, so I don't have to spend days trying to help her get over them not having the item she wanted, and I don't even have to be friends with her if I don't want to. And I don't want to. So I walked away. And then she started screaming, "How dare you walk away from me?" And I answered with, "How dare you cause a public scene about a $5 piece of junk? Frick right off." Then I left. My mother-in-law threw a pie through my window on Thanksgiving because I would not let her in my house. She had attempted to ruin our wedding not 1 month prior to this, and I was not dealing with her horse crap. We told her to leave, and she threw a pie through my window, shattered it, and my dog cut her paw on the glass. She wasn't invited to our house because she's Satan incarnate, and for some reason she was shocked that we wouldn't let her in because she's family. $4,200 window replacement. Old 60s home with giant custom windows. And the bish wonders why we are no contact. Family does not get a free pass. If family is crappy, you don't have to deal with them. I don't care what nonsense about blood you start spouting off. F bad family. Worked at a research brewery. They were trying to make drink concentrate. Never saw it successfully done while I was there. The lab director, there were 3 people total in this place, and the lab was a few 5G carboys with sugar being fermented at different levels, like a high school science project. Threw tantrums on the regular, but this time he was trying to spray water into a fermenter and he broke the nozzle on accident. He screamed frick loud enough to deafen the equipment, threw the broken nozzle against the fermenter I just cleaned, and stormed off, doing nothing about the hose spraying wildly all over everything I just cleaned. I tried to get his attention about the hose, and he red-faced yelled, "Clean it up!" Then he left. He was 24, and it was his first job out of college. Total spoiled brat. I'm fairly certain he had a job there because his mommy invested heavily in this harebrained concept. I still fantasize about putting him in the hospital. I worked with a guy who had such anger issues. I've seen him shout and scream at machines. I've witnessed him once throw a large socket wrench at the machine. It bounced back and hit him on the head. His biggest tantrum happened when we came to work. His pan had leaked over his overalls and he blamed someone for tampering with it. He took the rest of the week off unpaid as no one would own up to it. Went to see the Spurs play in Portland, and a fan tried to terrorize the poor guy at the ticket window into giving him a full refund because Pops was resting half his roster that night. Finally, the manager had to intervene and patiently explain Popovich is infamous for that. Buyer beware. The guy ripped his ticket up in frustration and started typing up an angry Yelp review of the Moda Center right then and there. An account manager at a company I worked for had a broken-down lease car and needed a replacement for the day. While in a call with the company that was responsible for that, he starts screaming at the top of his lungs that he can't possibly wait half an hour for a new car, throws the phone against a window, punches his monitor, cracking the screen, and runs out the door. He cut his hand pretty badly while doing all this and trailed blood through the whole office. They found him downstairs, sobbing in a corner. Apparently, he was going through some personal crap and just short-circuited, though he was an a-hole to begin with. Brother-in-law is an absolutely loathsome excuse for a human being. He was one of the pallbearers for his grandmother's funeral. Once at the ceremony, he refused to get out of the car and help carry the casket because the rest of us didn't give him and his wife enough attention before the funeral service. Had a fit right there, and I believe it took a threat from the father-in-law to get him moving. My high school chemistry teacher completely flipped out one day. Everyone in our class sat at work areas that had built-in sinks with those high-arching faucets. We were going to do some experiments one day and had some balance scales on our work areas. We also had some jerks who sat in the back and goofed around a lot. While the teacher is talking about the experiments we were going to do, Dummerer, and Dummerest started goofing. One of them, Dummerer, was sort of wiggling the faucet and it broke off in his hands. The teacher didn't see this, so Dummerer quickly puts the broken piece out of sight. Teacher turns around and notices something wrong and can't put his finger on it for a few seconds. Then he realizes what happened and his face clouds over. No other reaction though, at least not yet. Teacher goes back to explaining things and you can hear something in his voice, an edge. But the dummy brothers are oblivious. They start messing around with the scales and weighing stuff on their desk. Then Dummerist interrupts the teacher in mid-sentence. "Hey teacher, did you know my pencil weighs 35 grams? Teacher stops cold. Face darkens. Lips curl back. And he loses it. Did you touch the scale? Did you touch it? He storms to the back, grabs the scale off the desk, and goes back to the front and just starts raging. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember the details, but he went off on students, disrespect, damaging stuff, disrupting the class, etc., etc. The students all just sat there slack-jawed. At one point, he grabs the weighing pen from the scale and flung it across the room. After a while, he tried to compose himself. He grabbed a stack of papers from the experiment and started handing them out, and his hands were shaking so bad he could barely do it. Then he finally just left the classroom. We sat there for a while, then someone from administration came down and dismissed the class. Fun fact, when I was going to college, it was to be an education major, and stuff like this is why I dropped out. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.